Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and today I'm going to share some thoughts on the college campus protests and the response of the US government and law enforcement agencies to what is happening to Palestinian supporters on elite campuses in America, from Columbia University all the way to Emory University, and then also in Texas and other parts of the country. But before that, there are a couple of points that I do want to make. First, subscribe to Khanversation, like this video, and press the bell icon. And remember to share this video after you watch it. So the first thing that I want to point out is that this is the week in which the US Department of State has released its annual human rights report. And as you can listen now to Secretary Blinken preach democracy to the rest of the world, was lecturing the world about the UN Declaration of Human Rights and what that stood for: equal dignity of all human beings all over the world. And you can see what was going on American campuses in the United States.
I am pleased to be here to launch the 2023 Human Rights Report. At the end of last year, we marked the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, affirming the fundamental idea that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Those words, 75 years ago, enshrined a wide range of universal rights: civil and political, economic, social, cultural, the right to express ourselves freely, to choose our leaders, to worship as we wish, the right to education, to just labor conditions. Standing up for freedom and human rights is simply the right thing to do. But defending and promoting these inalienable and universal rights is also prosperous, stable. The report that we're putting out today presents a factual, systematic account of human rights records across nearly 200 countries and territories. Each one is held to the same standard.
The second point that I want to make is that Israel, for a few years now, has been faced with this particular political theoretical, shall we say, or political dilemma, that if it rejects the two-state solution, which means that it simply will not accept a Palestinian state between the river and the sea, as Netanyahu has said often and continues to say so, that he will not accept a Palestinian state. So Israel is now left with the choice of either to become an apartheid authoritarian state which treats Israelis and Palestinians differently in order to maintain Jewish supremacy inside the borders of Israel and maintain the Jewishness of the Israeli state. So in order to remain a Jewish state, it will have to win the demographic battles with, in spite of all the wars, etc. It seems Israel is probably going to lose to the Palestinians and Arabs within its borders. So what it will have to do is to basically disenfranchise them and create a special law for Jews and a special law for Arabs and Palestinians inside its borders. So basically, in order to defend its Jewishness, it will become an apartheid state, or it could become a secular democracy with equal rights to all, and with changing demography, should be prepared to have a Palestinian prime minister of Greater Israel. So that is Israel's dilemma. But a similar dilemma now plagues America. America now faces the choice whether to remain a democracy and then abandon its ironclad support for whatever Israel does, no matter how heinous, no matter how bloody, or it abandons its support or uncritical support for Israel, start demanding proper behavior in exchange for military and economic support, and remain a democracy. Because in order to support Biden's current foreign policy towards Israel, which essentially says, you do whatever you want, here's the money, and here's the legal support in the international forum. So we will in fact, it appears that now there are 6 veto powers in the UN Security Council. India, for the last 10 years, has been desperately trying to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council with veto, but Israel seems to enjoy the privileges because apparently the only purpose of US veto now is to defend Israel from international censure and from international law. So Israel now enjoys all of that thanks to Biden and an unlimited amount of money, and no matter what it does, there is absolutely no accountability either from the international courts or international institutions or from the US. Consider this. Biden has been calling for ceasefire and then voting to prevent the UN Security Council from passing resolutions on ceasefire. When the US does allow one resolution for ceasefire, the State Department and Biden go all out to say this is not binding. So what was the point of that? I don't understand. And then when Biden saw that Americans were not buying his rubbish, he went on to say that we cannot return to October 6th when all this is over. I don't know what he meant by what all this is over. When the war ends, essentially, we have to go back and revive that 2-state solution and create a Palestinian state. So when the UN moves forward to recognize a Palestinian state, the US against vetoes. So the United States is talking in one way and doing something else all the way, but all it is doing is to basically protecting Israel from international criticism and letting it do whatever it wants. But not only that, in the past few months, the US went from passing a bill with the House passed for $14 billion, or rather Biden asked for $14 billion. The Republicans upped it to $17 billion and passed that bill in the House, which was then not passed in the Senate. And now, eventually, the US, after seeing everything that has happened in Gaza, nearly 37,000 people killed, over 1.2 million people displaced, most of the civilian infrastructure completely destroyed and devastated. It has become a desert. Most of the victims are women and children. It is quite apparent that a lot of this is designed towards destroying Gaza. The International Criminal ICJ Court of Justice has twice indicated that Israel may have committed a genocide or is in the process, or should at least take action to prevent a genocide. It is apparent that some people in its administration are talking about ethnic cleansing. Americans first pretend as if Israel has not ever expressed an intention of eliminating Palestinians in Gaza. And when evidence is presented to them, then they say that, oh, they didn't mean it or whatever. So there is no accountability of Israel in this foreign policy of the United States, giving weapons to a country which is committing a genocide and which everybody can see. At least some Americans can't stand it. Progressives in the Democratic Party and college campuses. So you see a massive protest on college campuses. It started very early on at Harvard and other places, and now Columbia has taken the lead on this. So what is happening with the campus universe? There are 4 things that the students are demanding on all the campuses. And let me tell you what their demands are. Number 1, the students are demanding that there should be a permanent ceasefire, that the war should stop. Number 2, and they want the United States to do everything that it can, and there's a lot that the US can do to pressure Israel to end this genocidal war. Number 2, the United States should end its funding of this war machine. The US has sent unaccounted of weapons to Israel during this. 2,000, 4,000-pound bombs have been dropped on hospitals and schools. Israel claims that Hamas is hiding behind every victim. Even though the bombs are so heavy and so huge, the Hamas character hiding behind a child doesn't seem to die. 37,000 people killed. And the third thing that the students want is that their universities should divest from companies that support Israel. And number four, of course, they want to see freedom for Palestine and the creation of a Palestinian state.
हम क्या चाहते हैं? आजादी। अरे हम क्या चाहते हैं? आजादी। अरे पैलेस्टाइन की आजादी। अरे पैलेस्टाइन की आजादी। अरे छीन के लेंगे आजादी। अरे छीन के लेंगे आजादी। है हक हमारा आजादी। है हक हमारा आजादी। है छीन के बोलना।
The fourth is kind of a philosophical position because their protest is not going to lead to the creation of the Palestinian state, but their protest can get their universities to divest from Israeli firms or supporting Israel, etc. So these are the demands. And the retaliation, the brutality with which the US government is suppressing this is astonishing. The only thing that is missing is dogs. This looks like the way the Jim Crow laws are being enforced in the South. The only thing missing is dogs. These young children, instead of appreciating their fervor, their call for social justice, we are demonizing them, we are brutalizing them, we are ruining their careers. There are now pro-Israeli lobby groups which are targeting them and trying to make sure that they never get jobs on the Wall Street or anywhere, and so on and so forth. Just watch. There will be websites with all their photographs, their faces, etc. They will be targeted. They will be targeted by pro-Israeli forces in the United States, and the US government, instead of protecting its own citizens from foreign interference, is going to protect the foreign interference. What is interesting is that there's this constant talk of protecting Jewish students from these protests. What harm are these protests doing? The First Amendment allows them freedom of speech and freedom to protest peacefully. There hasn't been much violence. But the talk is it's generating fear among the Jewish students who are, studying for their final exams because the semester is ending. What about these students themselves who are being beaten by the police? Tear gas has been used by them in Georgia. Georgia has fired, the police in Georgia, apparently at Emory University, has fired rubber bullets at them. Professors are being arrested. And one professor was so brutally arrested, she was thrown down and two cops grabbed at her. I wondered whether she could breathe. Just watch that video of the professor, this lady, the way the Georgia cops literally threw like a WWF move. It was like a judo move that he exercised on a professor of economics. I'm so thrilled as I watch more and more students coming out and standing up to this extremely, shall we say, fascist nature of the state that has become under Biden. Joe Biden promised to restore democracy. Joe Biden promised a middle-class foreign policy. Vast majority, more than 50%, nearly 60% of Americans, especially from the Democratic Party, are opposed to the US foreign policy currently. This doesn't represent the policies that the American political elite are pursuing, does not represent the will of the American people. And they're trying to break the will of the American people by brutally, basically putting pressure on these students by threatening to ruin their lives because they are standing up to US support for Israel. This is just unbelievably shocking to me. The biggest recipient of pro-Israeli funding in this country has been Joe Biden. By far, even more than Hillary Clinton, $6 million. What a great deal. And he sends billions and billions of dollars to Israel, even when it is disobeying America's laws and principles on how those weapons should be used. So this is some of the worrying things that I see. And instead of taking pride in our youth who are standing up for justice, the very same principle that Blinken is lecturing the world about in Beijing, also he's talking about human rights and freedom of speech. Those are the very values that these college students are standing for. They are proving that there is some freedom of speech in America. The government is trying to prove that there is no freedom of speech in America. These students are putting their lives and careers on the line to prove that there is a freedom of assembly in this country. It is the government and the police force and the politicians, the president and the speaker themselves, who are trying to prove that there is no freedom of speech in this country, no freedom of assembly. You cannot protest even peacefully. This is the message that Joe Biden is sending to the world. That when it comes to Israel, you cannot even protest peacefully. Many states in this country have passed laws against divestment and boycott. These are Mahatma Gandhi's principles. Right now, the US is lecturing India when it comes to human rights. India had a protest in Shanbagh against a law which Muslims feel is discriminatory. The protest lasted for several months. And the whole media of India was focused on that protest. Such brutality was not demonstrated there at all. And the US feels it can lecture the rest of the world on democracy. This is American foreign policy. And if you're thinking that this is just an Israeli exception, that, oh, because of religious reasons, America is all about protecting Israel no matter what. No, it's happening in other spheres too. Read the stories about how American politicians literally conspired to sneak the bill into this Israel and Ukraine bill, a ban on TikTok. I really don't understand TikTok. I neither consume TikTok nor I have an account. I don't know how to use it properly. But apparently 170 million Americans are on TikTok, and the US government is banning free speech. And the excuse that they are using is that China will get the data that TikTok collects. I have some news for the United States government. The data that they fear that TikTok is collecting, China can simply buy it off the market. Data has become a commodity today. So just using that as an excuse to pursue a foreign policy goal, which is undermining the First Amendment. That's the point of this conversation, that US foreign policy is destroying US democracy. Rather than promoting democracy overseas and strengthening democracy at home, the foreign policy of Joe Biden, the goals that he has said that no matter what, we will protect Israel, no matter what, we will protect Ukraine, and no matter what, we will protect Taiwan. All of these geopolitical goals of the United States, which apparently are not even debated as to how they advance US national interests, are, when challenged, they are being forced through these fascist means that you can see on the campuses at the universities in the US. This is absolutely stunning. Let me tell you, this is just, the hypocrisy is so profound that is unbelievable. But I'm very happy that the future of America is better than the present of America. Is these same children who are standing up for justice, for equality, for freedom, that are politicians who sell their soul to lobbies. You can see here, right now I'm showing you how Biden is the biggest recipient of money from pro-Israeli PACs in the US. Over $6 million. And that's what you can see. There are indirect ways of funding through funding PACs, and then there's dark money. Tons of it, I have no idea. There's also a class issue, which I don't want to bring it up, but the presence of a large number of billionaires who got the president of Harvard fired. So there are a few handful of billionaires who are throwing around hundreds of millions of dollars and literally undermining the academic freedom of American universities. what do you want these universities to do? To pledge allegiance to a foreign country? Is that what the purpose of Columbia and Harvard is, to protect Israel and undermine any and every protest? This is a very bizarre situation. You can see protests even in the State Department. I've been here in this country for more than 30 years. I've seen preemptive protests in the Iraq War in 2002. But I have never seen open rebellion even in the State Department. The people are resigning because of the unfairness and unjustness of this foreign policy. The good news is that all the people who are showing fascist tendencies are old, and all the people whose conscience is still alive are young. May God protect these young people, and may God protect their conscience. I hope they do not, as they grow up, become part of the system as it is today. This is untenable. I can guarantee you, if the United States pursues foreign policy like this and will not listen to it, if the US elite pursues a foreign policy that is not consistent with the values and interests and needs of its population, the only way it can succeed is by destroying democracy. And the first thing it will have to do is simply strike off the First Amendment from the US Constitution. Without the First Amendment, the US is not a democracy. And what you're seeing these policemen beating, using rubber bullets, using all their repressive tactics on students is essentially an assault on the First Amendment of the US Constitution. This is a very critical moment for the United States. Democracy is declining everywhere in the world, and if the United States will not support democracy and not promote democracy, there will be no democracy. The whole world, starting with Washington, D.C., will look like Beijing. Tiananmen Square and New York. Emory University, look at what happened there. Anyway, I want to stop with that before my blood pressure goes out of control and I feel further ill. I'm already sick of what I'm watching and observing. So please subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, make sure you share this video widely, and thank you for watching. I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan.